I'd like to share with you today is a part of the scriptures that I find to be one of the greatest examples in a study of forgiveness in the Bible. And normally I would not include this in my forgiveness class because it takes so long and I just kind of run out of time, and I had to figure out what I needed to drop. And this was the section that I dropped out of the class. But I really love it, and I want to share it with you today. So I'm going to do a share screen on the scriptures that I'm going to be using. So you'll see it on the side there. Okay. Can everybody see it?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
All righty. This is the study of Joseph. Joseph was the guy with the Technicolor dream coat that they made a Broadway play out of. I saw that years ago in Chicago with Donny Osmond as Joseph. He's probably too old to play that part now. Anyway, it was a great show, but the foundation of it is found in Genesis, and it begins in chapter 37, and it has 13 chapters out of the Bible is dedicated to this formation of the 12 tribes of Israel. Because Jacob, who was later called by God Israel, had these sons that when everything was finished in the book here of Genesis, they're all residing in Egypt. And they stayed there for about 400 years, growing and multiplying in number until they were put into slavery. And then Moses came on the scene, and he was an agent that God had sent to bring the children of Israel out of Egypt into the promised land that God had originally promised to Abraham. So we're going to start in Genesis 37. Joseph was the next to the last child, and he was the firstborn of Jacob in his old age with, I think it was Rebecca. I think it's what the name was. He had a lot of wives and a lot of children by them. But Joseph was a boy, actually, at this point in the story. And God chose him to reveal certain revelation and visions about his life and the life of the family. Now, they knew that they were blessed by God, but they didn't know quite how God was going to pull this off and how the promise that God had given to Abraham was going to come to pass, how long it would take. You see, when a promise is given, and that doesn't necessarily happen right then. It's kind of like a lot of promises that we're given about eternal life. Well, the church has been waiting around 2,000 years to see Christ come back and for all that to be fulfilled. But we're still waiting. And how he's going to do that, we have little glimpses of from the scriptures of when and where that's going to take place. But still, it's some big question marks because it just has not come to pass yet. So being that particular position, the family was young, and he became the favorite son of Jacob. And of course, you can imagine what that would do for the older brothers. They became quite jealous of him. And then God revealed to him certain things about the family, like the brothers and the father and mother were going to bow down to him, which meant he was going to be given authority that they didn't have, an authority over them. That's what the bowing down means. So let's go to Genesis chapter 37, and we'll start in verse 3. It says, "Now Israel loved Joseph more than all his children, because he was the son of his old age, and he made him a coat of many colors." And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably unto him. I know if you've ever been in a family where brothers won't talk to each other because of various past events.
Yep. Or sisters.
Or sisters, yeah, family members. And it's usually over the stupidest things.
Yep.
And in this case, it's another stupid thing. Because daddy's showing more attention to you than he is to us.
Yeah.
But this coat had an oriental significance, because when a coat like this was given to one of the sons, it meant preferential treatment. Okay, this was a great honor given to one of the children. Verse 5, and Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brethren, and they hated him yet the more. And he said unto them, hear, I pray you, this dream which I have dreamed. For behold, we are binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheaf arose and also stood upright, and behold, your sheaves stood around about and made obeisance to my sheaf. Now, you know what a sheaf is? And when you see in the fields today, they're rolling up and baling hay and stuff like that. Well, they didn't have those kind of machines, so they cut them with a sickle, and then they tied them together so that they could dry and not just lay on the ground. And so the picture that he's painting for them is his sheaf is standing up right, and they're all laying down and being obeisance to him. Okay, got the picture. Let's see. Verse 8. And his brethren said unto him, shalt thou indeed reign over us? And shalt thou indeed have a dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams, for his words.
Wow.
Now, I've heard some criticism of Joseph that this was a bad mistake on his part to reveal the dream. But it doesn't say that he had made a mistake, okay? It just didn't say that he was told to tell it to his brothers. So we don't know. There was an occasion back, I was at a weekend in the Word. No, it was actually called a Word and Business Conference. And there was a believer who was a police officer in Rochester. And there at that time, there was a criminal who his thing was he would go into old women's houses, old ladies' houses, and rape them, which sounds disgusting, which it was. But this was a serial crime. And of course, because it was getting so much attention, the police department made it a priority to catch this guy. So the Rochester police was on the hunt. And my friend said, I believe that I'm going to be the one to catch this guy. And I said, well, I believe you're right. Now, this is what I would recommend that you do. You tell 2 other police officers that this is what you're going to do, and it's going to be because God will show you. Give God the credit. And he did. And he called me a month later, and he said, I found him and arrested him. Now, if that had been a situation where nobody knew that he was going to do it, it wouldn't have near the effect to say, well, God showed me. But because he had announced it to 2 trusted friends that God had showed him that he was going to be one to catch this guy, now they could be witnesses to that effect. Now, Joseph has got this vision, and he told his brothers, which just made him angry, more angry with him. But when it comes to pass that this happens, they will be able to believe that it was God who pulled all this off. Now, Joseph goes through some hard times. We're going to read a little bit about it. I believe we're in verse 9. And he dreamed yet another dream and told it to his brethren. and said, Behold, I have dreamed a dream more, and behold, the sun and moon and 11 stars made obeisance to me. And he told it to his father and his brethren, and his father rebuked him and said unto him, What is this dream that thou hast dreamed? Shall I and thy mother, thy brethren, indeed come to bow down ourselves to thee, to the earth? Even his father, who had received revelation in the past, was rebuking him because he said these things. And his brethren envied him, but his father observed the saying. So he's going, well, he's thinking about this. And his brethren went to feed their father's flock in Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, Do not thy brethren feed the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send thee unto them. And he said unto him, Here am I. And he said unto him, Go, I pray thee, see whether it be well with thy brethren, and well with thy flocks, and bring me word again. So he sent him to the vale of Hebron, and he came to the Shechem. So he was kind of like, Go out and tell me how everything's going. And a certain man found him, and beheld, he was wandering in a field, and the man asked him, saying, What seekest thou? And he said, I seek my brethren, to tell me, I pray thee, where they feed their flocks. The man said, They are departed thence, for I heard them say, Let us go to Dothan. And Joseph went after his brethren and found them in Dothan. And when they saw him afar off, even before he came near unto them, they conspired against him to slay him. Now they aren't just angry with him. They want him dead. And they said one to another, Behold, this dreamer cometh. Come now, therefore, I pray, slay him and cast him to some pit, and we will say, Some evil beast hath devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams. And Reuben heard it, and he delivered him out of their hands, and said, Let us not kill. And Reuben said unto them, Shed no blood, but cast him into this pit that is in the wilderness, and lay no hand upon him, that he might rid him out of their hands, to deliver him into his father's hand. So Reuben interceded, convinced them to just throw him in the pit. And then his plan was to take him from the pit and take him to his dad. Now you think, Reuben's a pretty good guy. And it certainly is, out of this crowd, the one that's thinking. But you'll see later that he has his own problems. And it came to pass, when Joseph would come to the brethren, they spirited Joseph out of his coat, and his coat of many colors that was on him. So he was wearing around that fancy coat out in the field. He always was overdressed for the occasion, you might say. And they took him and cast him into a pit, and the pit was empty, and there was no water in it. And they sat down to eat bread. And they lifted up their eyes and looked, and behold, a company of Ishmaelites came from Gilead with their camels, bearing spice and balm and myrrh, going to carry it down to Egypt. Now, all those spices and stuff was pretty expensive for the time. They only grew in a certain region, which was on the other side of the desert area, and they got pretty good price when they took it into Egypt. All right. And where am I at? 26. And Judah said unto his brethren, What profit it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh. And his brethren were content. That's a good idea. We could make some money out of this. 28. Then there passed a Midianite merchantman, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. What does that sound like?
Yeah.
Being sold. He's being sold. And they brought Joseph into Egypt. And Reuben returned to the pit, and behold, Joseph was not in the pit, and he rent his clothes. So they thought he probably thought they'd killed him and buried him. And he returned with his brethren and said, the child is not, and I, whither shall I go? And they took Joseph's coat and killed a kid of the goats and dripped the coat in the blood. And they rent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, this have we found. Know now whether it be thy son's coat or no. And he knew it and said, it is my son's coat. An evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces. Now, Jacob came up with this idea, but they led him to believe it. They purposely led him in the wrong direction. See, they bring him his coat, it's full of blood. What else was he going to think? All right. And Jacob rent his clothes and put sackcloth upon his loins and mourned for his son many days. Now, Reuben was among the crowd that brought the coat back. But he didn't tell the father what really happened, or that the coat was had blood on it from a goat. So he was going to let the lie remain. Although he saved Joseph's life, he still let the lie remain. And his father went through absolute devastation. He loved this son best of all, and now sons are allowing him to think that he was dead. Verse 35, and all his sons and all his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, for I will go down into the grave unto my son mourning. Thus his father wept for him. So he had no plans of coming out of this grief. He was going to be in this grief until he died. That's pretty deep. And the Midianites sold him into Egypt, into Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Now, we're not going to go through each scripture of these 13 chapters, but we're going to highlight some things that's happened to him. See, God had shown Joseph that they had great plans for him, and he held on to that promise in what would become some of the worst conditions of his life. Okay. He never forgot the promise that God gave him. Now he's being sold into slavery. Okay. And as God is able to do, he bloom where you're planted. Have you ever heard that term? Well, Joseph started that whole thing because he was put into this slavery condition, yet God caused him to bloom there. He became the head of the household. He had more authority than any of the other servants, and right under the head of the household was his authority. Only the head of the household had more say so. Okay. And Potiphar was greatly impressed with this guy. I mean, he made him the chief servant right away.
Wow.
So Potiphar had a wife with wandering eyes, and she wanted to have Joseph in a little fling. Yeah, that's a good word. I was working for it. So he refused. He ran off, but guess what? His coat, she grabbed off his back to prove whatever she was going to lie. She's getting ready to tell her husband, which was, this man tried to rape me, and I have his coat here as proof. And so Potiphar, rather than killing him, which I'm sure he could have done, he put him into jail. Now he's gone from a slave to a prisoner. All right. So as soon as he gets into prison, the keeper of the prison, the head prisoner, he saw Joseph's ability, and then he made him head of all the prisoners. So he'd tell Joseph what he wanted to have done, and then Joseph made sure it was carried out. Genesis 39, verse 22. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in prison. And whatsoever they did, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made to prosper. Now, Joseph, again, remembered his promises. And not one time during this whole event of these struggles in his life does the word ever record him complaining. Not once. Not once did it. But what we are able to see from this, and Joseph was seeing himself, the thing that the devil wanted to have happen to him for hurt, God turned to good. So we have been given many promises too, haven't we? And of course, God knows those promises that's been made to us, just like he knew what Joseph had said when he told his brothers. See, once you speak it out loud, then the devil can know. So the devil knew that this man was blessed, right? And at this point, it was known by the devil which family group was going to have the Christ child. And it was going to come through Jacob. But he had 12 sons. Which one was it going to be? It must be Joseph, because he was blessed by God. God had other plans. So we'll go to chapter 41, starting in verse 28. So Joseph's in prison, and these two guys, which are a part of the administration of the Pharaoh. Pharaoh is another word for king. He's thrown these two guys in because he's gotten upset with them. And then they have their dreams that's bothering them, but they couldn't interpret the dream. They didn't understand what those dreams were. And so they heard that Joseph was a man of God, so they took these dreams to him. And he was able to interpret them. One was happy and the other was very sad. Okay. Verse 28. This is the thing which I spoke unto Pharaoh. Pharaoh heard, because the one guy was brought out who got the good news with the promise that he was going to tell Pharaoh what happened. But he forgot. He forgot the blessings. And so it was a while. And Joseph spent some time in jail. But Pharaoh got some dreams as well. And he didn't understand them. And he tried to get his sorcerers and the dream guys. And they said, okay, you tell me what this means. And they couldn't. And then the guy says, I know a guy who can interpret dreams. And so they bring out Joseph before Pharaoh. And this is the thing which I have spoken unto Pharaoh about God, how what God is about to do, what he showeth unto Pharaoh. Behold, there come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt. And there shall arise after them 7 years of famine. And all the plenty shall be forgotten in the land of Egypt, and the famine shall consume the land. And the plenty shall not be known by the land by reason of that famine following, for it shall be very grievous. And for that the dream was doubled unto Pharaoh twice. It is become a thing, is established by God, and God shall shortly bring it to pass. Now, there's a spiritual principle. When receiving revelation, if you get one revelation about a certain thing, it may change. But if it's twice, that means that God has established that it will come to pass, and it's going to happen shortly. Let's see. For 33. And now, therefore, let Pharaoh know, or look out a man discreet and wise, and set him over the land of Egypt. He didn't say me. He said, get your best guy. to watch out for this and figure out what we need to do. Let him do this, and let him appoint officers over the land, and take up the 5th part of the land of Egypt into the 7 plenteous years, and let them gather all the food of those good years that come, and lay up corn under the hand of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the cities. Store up food, yeah. And that food shall be for store to the land against the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt, that the land of perish not through the famine. And the thing was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such a one as this, a man in whom the Spirit of God is? Pharaoh recognized that Joseph had Holy Spirit. Now, before Jesus Christ, the Spirit was given upon condition. And the condition is as long as you need it. Okay, some guys received it only for a short time to accomplish that which they needed to do. Some guys had it and then did some kind of sin and lost it, like Samson. But even then, when he sought forgiveness, God gave it back to him. But the point was, the Spirit could come and go. For us today, that Spirit has been given as birth. And once you receive seed by birth, you're never going to lose it. You can't lose who your mommy and daddy is. Even if they sold you off into slavery, you're still mommy and daddy, because it's by seed. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, for as much as God has showed thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Now, this is amazing to me, because he's getting ready to give this guy he just met and told him about 14 years of future for Egypt, no proof of anything except that he was able to tell him what the dream meant. But God must have worked in his heart to do this, make this decision. Okay, what verse am I in?
No, you're 39.
39? Yes, and Pharaoh said to Joseph, for as much as God has shown all this, there is none as discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. Now, Joseph is, in Greek, it's the word tupos, but it's an example. And in the authority that God gave Jesus Christ, it was like this. And it's even stated again that Jesus Christ has been given all authority except for God. Do you see the parallel here? Pharaoh has given Joseph all authority in the land to run the business of the Egypt. Only I will be superior than you. Same thing with God and Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ has been given all authority, and he is the head of the church, but only in that God is superior. So it's amazing. All right, what verse am I in?
42.
42. Thanks for keeping track. And Pharaoh took off his ring of his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand, and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. These are all signs of authority that he was given him. And he made him to ride in the second chariot which he had, and they cried unto him, bow the knee. And he made him ruler over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without thee shall no man lift up his hand or foot in the land of Egypt. In other words, he's guiding everything. And Pharaoh called Joseph the name Now, this is going to be a tongue twister. I had to look it up. Sothnath Pathneach. Say that 5 times real quick.
Z for short.
Yeah, we'll just call him Zeph. We'll call him Zeph.
Exactly.
And he gave him to wife Anasteth, the daughter of
Potiphar.
Poti, priest of On.
Potiphar.
And Joseph went out over all the land of Egypt. So he goes and he surveys everything he's got to be looking after.
Gave him a wife.
So he's all set up.
Yeah.
And Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went throughout all the land of Egypt. And in the 7 plenteous years of the earth brought forth by handfuls. And he gathered up all the foods of the 7 years which were in the land of Egypt, and laid up the food in the cities, the food of the fields, which was round about every city, and laid he up in the same. And Joseph gathered corn in the sand, as the sand of the sea, very much, until he left numbering, for it was without number. Now, I know somebody who has had a chance to go to Egypt, and they've actually discovered one of the places that this happened. It was great storage vats, places for grain. And at the bottom of it, it was like a big V, where there was steps going down, and there was chambers at the bottom of the steps where they would get the grain and pay for it.
Wow.
All right. So that is established by archaeological evidence. I see here.
49.
49. Where am I at?
Something like that. 49.
Okay. So Joseph became number 2 in authority in Egypt. Let's go to chapter 42, verse 1.
Okay.
Now, 14, or they're in now the lean years, the years of famine. Of course, this famine is not isolated just to Egypt. And in the land of Canaan, where his family is, they're going through a drought as well. And so not only food for the family was needed, but they're shepherds. And they got to find food to feed the sheep and the goats. And that's where the famine really hits hard, is that all the grass that they graze on, everything else, is drying up. So the father sends some of his, 10 of his sons to Egypt to get food. Because, of course, the word's out all over the land. And guess what? Gold is valued if you're starving. Not much. And so people were willing to pay whatever the price was. And so that, at this point, Egypt becomes the absolute richest country in the world, because all the people from around, as well as Egypt itself, are now paying all this gold to be fed. Yeah. Verse 1, and now Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt. Jacob said unto his sons, why do you look one upon another? Well, you standing around with your thumbs up your, never mind. And he said, behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get ye down thither and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die. And Joseph, 10 brothers, went down to buy corn in Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, and it's the younger brother, the last brother, Jacob sent not with his brethren, for he said, lest peradventure mischief befall him. Now, guess what's still in his mind?
Right. The loss of Joseph.
The loss of Joseph. And he didn't want to lose Benjamin as well. And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and it was he that sold to all the people of the land. And Joseph's brother came and bowed down themselves before him with their faces to the earth.
It's coming to pass.
Is this what was prophesied to Joseph?
Yes.
That's right. Did they realize it? No, not at all. Okay. Where am I?
7.
7. And Joseph saw his brothers, and he knew them, but made himself strange unto them. Remember the Egyptians, they did a lot of painting of their faces and stuff like, especially if you were a high mucky muck. So he made themselves strange to them and spoke roughly unto them. And he said unto them, Whence come ye? And they said, From the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph said to the brethren, But they knew not him. And Joseph remembered the dreams which he had of them, and said unto them, Ye are spies, to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. And he said unto him, Nay, my Lord, but to buy food that are of thy servants to come. We are all one man's son. We are true men. Thy servants are no spies. And he said to them, Nay, but to see the nakedness of the land ye are come. And they said, The servants are 12 brethren, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is not. Well, guess who they're referring to there? They couldn't even say his name. One is not. And Joseph spake unto them, that is it that I spake unto you, saying, Ye are spies? Hereby shall ye be proved. By the life of Pharaoh you shall not go forth hence, except your youngest brother come hither. So he wants Benjamin to come. Send one of you and fetch him. Let him fetch your brother, and ye shall be kept in prison, that your words may be proved, whether there be any truth in you, or else by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies. And he put them all together inward 3 days. And Joseph said to them the 3rd day, This do and live, for I fear God. If ye be true men, let one of your brethren be bound in the house of your prison. Go ye, carry corn for the famine of your houses, but bring your youngest brethren to me. So shall your words be fulfilled, and ye shall not die as they did. So he knows that they need food back in the family. So he sends the brothers, kept one, and the rest of them went with the food. Verse 42. If ye be true men, let one of your, I read that. Verse 21. And they said one to another, We are very guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish in his soul when he besought us. We would not hear. Therefore is this distress that come upon us. Now, it's been many years. Okay, it's been probably over 20. I'm guessing there. Don't hold me to it. But he spent time in Potiphar's house, spent time in prison. Now he had the full 7 years of plenty. And now the famine doesn't say how long into the famine it is. But you see, I'm talking about. But they still have this feeling of guilt. It's right up there in the forefront of their minds. And when anything goes wrong, this is why. This is the reason I'm having problems, is because I'm getting the consequences of selling our brother into slavery. Verse 22. And Reuben answered them, saying, Spake I not unto you, saying, Do not sin against the child? See, I told you so. And you would not hear, therefore, behold, also his blood is required. And they knew not that Joseph understood them. And he spake, for he spake to them as with an interpreter. And he turned himself about from them and did what? He wept. And returned to them again and I'm sure he had to wipe and make sure his mascara was all good.
Oh, yeah.
And communed with them, and took from them Simon and bound him before their eyes. So Simon's the one that's chosen to stay back. You see, they had guilt over what they had did to Joseph. And it touched Joseph's heart that they recognized that. Joseph did get his whole family back into Egypt so he could save them from the famine. Now we're not going to go through all the steps he did to take it, but now his whole family is in Egypt. And he goes to Pharaoh and presents some of his family, and Pharaoh gives him permission to place them in the land of Goshen. Now, Goshen is the most beautiful, productive, farm-wise in the land of Egypt. And it's in that part of the world that we now call the Gaza Strip. Okay, but it's more towards Egypt, that along the coastline there. So they were settled in the best land where they prospered until they were put into slavery many years later. Then Jacob dies, but their guilt remained. Now, they knew from Joseph's acts of kindness that they were forgiven. Okay? But what they did not do is believe it. They didn't believe the forgiveness. So when dad dies, they assume that now that dad's out of the picture, he's going to get his revenge on us. And the reason he hasn't done it so far is for the sake of our father. Verse 15. And when Joseph's brethren saw that their father had died, they said, Joseph will peradventure hate us, and will certainly requite us all the evil which we did unto him. And they sent a messenger unto Joseph, saying, Thy father did command before he died, saying, So shall ye say unto Joseph, Forgive. Daddy said,
You have to forgive us.
You have to forgive us. I pray thee now, the trespass of thy brethren and their sin. They're speaking in the father's voice, even though he'd already died. For they did unto thee evil, and now we pray thee, forgive the trespasses of thy servants, of the God of thy father. And Joseph wept when they spake unto him. See, he was so emotionally tied to this whole thing. Yet he did not seek revenge, even though they put his life through hell.
Yeah.
But would he have the right to do that? Yes. And in his position of authority, could he have done it without question? Yes. Verse 18. And his brethren also went and fell down before his face, and they said, Behold, we be thy servants. And Joseph said to them, Fear not, for am I in the place of God? But as for you, ye thought evil against me, but God meant it unto good, to bring to pass, as it is this day, to save much people alive. Now therefore, fear ye not, I will nourish you and your little ones. And he comforted them and spake kindly unto them. I've heard the term, I just can't forgive myself. But I don't see that in the Word. Nowhere that can I see in the Word that we're commanded to forgive ourselves. Nor are we even taught that we can forgive ourselves. What this is it's not in the Bible, okay? But what it is a recent development in psychology to try to help people deal with guilt. That you somehow can excuse yourself of wrongdoing that you've done, just so that you will not have this guilty feeling. But what the Bible tells us to do is to seek out those we have hurt, we have offended, and ask forgiveness. And we're also to ask forgiveness from God. The problem is, then becomes, well, I believe the forgiveness. Their brethren didn't believe the forgiveness that Joseph had given them to begin with. And so many times that's with us too. We just do not accept that forgiveness and let it cleanse us. from that guilt. And of course, sometimes it's not available, but God can certainly forgive us our sins, which he's done. That's not a question that he forgives us our sins. Now it's up to us to absolutely believe it and not walk around feeling guilty, because there's nothing that we can do of ourselves to forgive ourselves of sin. In other words, why would you need Christ? If we can just forgive ourselves of sin, just so we don't feel guilty, we didn't need Christ. But we needed Christ to get forgiveness of sins. All right. Joseph never complained and kept believing that as long as he kept the vision of God, God would bring it to pass. Let's keep our heart on God's promises to us and let those things the devil wanted to hurt us with be turned to good. All right.